Right now, fallout in New York City and across the country after a grand jury did not return an indictment against a white police officer in the death of an unarmed black man. And as protesters took to the streets in New York and other cities, Attorney General Eric Holder announced there would be a federal civil rights investigation into Eric Garner's death. Joining us now, Robert Bianchi, former prosecutor and trial attorney, and Brian Claypool, civil rights litigator. Both are also criminal defense attorneys. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Sean.
Brian, it's my understanding that you handled a case very much like this. Do you think that the police are at fault here?
Oh, John, absolutely. There are 3 words that came out of Eric Garner's mouth that warrant an indictment in this case. And those 3 words are, "I can't breathe." He said that at least 4 times. So we can argue till the cows come home about whether it's a chokehold, whether it's not a chokehold, whether he died of cardiac arrest or whether he died from asphyxiation. But the bottom line is, once a suspect is on the ground, flat, and he's saying, "I can't breathe," the officer has an obligation to release his arm from under his neck, and he could have been saved. That supports a negligent homicide indictment, and I'm appalled that this officer wasn't indicted.
Robert, you say that it doesn't necessarily mean, though, that a crime was committed in this case.
Yeah, I think you have to look at a difference between a criminal action in which the officer is presumed to be a criminal defendant, in which he's got the constitutional protections and the highest standard of proof that a prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, versus poor police practices. First off, it wasn't a chokehold. Secondly, the thing that's very important to understand here is that we all know from our training, and I've gone through this training myself personally, that the fact that he was able to speak means that his wind wasn't cut off. And if you look at this video very carefully, you will notice that when he first said he can't breathe, the officer's hands were not around his neck. They had been removed at that point in time. So I think that the video speaks for itself in terms of that this was a takedown procedure and not a chokehold where his blood was being cut from his brain or his breath from his windpipe.
Brian, he also had asthma.
Yeah, hey, John?
Yeah, go ahead.
The case I had in Central California dealt with this issue called positional asphyxia. And the gentleman I represented, the family I represented in that case, he died of positional asphyxia. Let me explain what that is. You can't look at this case just by chokehold. If a body's flat on the ground, you're pulling up his neck. If officers are putting pressure on Garner's back, which they are, that creates a phenomena called positional asphyxia. It stops his ability to breathe, no blood to his brain, causing the cardiac arrest. So the DA in this case and the U.S. Department of Justice needs to investigate the other police officers as well. These officers are trained, John. They know that when a suspect's being pulled from his neck, you cannot put pressure on his back, and nobody's talking about that.
But Robert, nobody's also talking about the fact that, you know, this was a guy who was told to put his arms behind his back and you know, let the police put handcuffs on him, and he resisted.
I worked civil litigation for many years, and then I was the head county prosecutor. We did a lot of training on this issue, and this is exactly the point. You must comply with the police officers when they arrest, even whether or not you think the arrest is appropriate or not. It is not a place to engage in a debate. That's for a court of law. And when that does not happen, people get hurt, people get injured, and police officers in many cases, whether you're black or white, I agree, there are issues of positional asphyxia, but when an officer is trying to take somebody down, unfortunately, most times there's not an issue, but sometimes there is. You need to submit to that arrest. And when you're dealing with criminal conduct, where you're looking to put somebody in prison for having done something that's inappropriate, this officer followed his training, his protocol, the takedown procedure. It is unfortunate, and I will say this, very important. The police practices need to change here, because well before this situation got to the way it was, I think it could have been de-escalated by verbal commands, by explaining to him he's being placed under arrest and trying to take a little bit more time before you actually went into a physical force scenario, because whenever you do that with a police officer, you risk the danger of being injured or killed.
Robert Bianchi and Brian Claypool, it's a very sad case, but we appreciate you coming in today to discuss it with us.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Thanks.